A general principle of biocompatible dentistry would state that everything we implant or leave in and around a tooth represents a systemic exposure whose impact must be accounted for and considered. The good news is there is an extensive program of testing for materials newly introduced to the market. The ISO 10993 standard and its American version, the FDA's Blue Book Memorandum G95-1, outline these requirements. The problem is that in the real world of the dental marketplace, this thorough testing regime is almost always bypassed by the FDA's grandfather clause, Section 501K of the FDA statute of 1976. As well, laboratory benchtop biocompatibility testing doesn't account for variations in patients' individual responses to artificial materials.
Perhaps in an attempt to improve the status quo, in 2016, the United States Food and Drug Administration, FDA, published a document entitled, quote, Use of International Standard ISO 10993-1, Biological Evaluation of Medical Devices, Part 1, Evaluation and Testing Within a Risk Management Process, end quote. The purpose of this publication was to provide non-binding recommendations and to offer the current thinking of the FDA on the topic of risk of medical devices. The source for this is the U.S. Department of Health and Human Services, Food and Drug Administration Center for Devices and Radiological Health, 2016. An updated version of the ISO 10993-1 was subsequently published in August 2018. It contained some changes in regard to medical device testing, and it was stated that the primary aim of that document was, quote, protection of humans from potential biological risks arising from the use of medical devices, end quote. The source of this is ISO/TC 194, Biological and Clinical Evaluation of Medical Devices, 2018. However, a company that offers support for medical device testing, including, quote, rationales for the selection or waiving tests, end quote, explained of the new version ISO 10993-1 published in 2018. Quote, in the new version of the standard, not all biological effects should be assessed by biological testing. Some tests can now be waived if there is sound rationale to support the decision, end quote. The source for this is Biological Evaluation of Medical Devices as an Essential Part of the Risk Management Process, Updates, ISO 10993-1, 2018. At the 2019 8th European Workshop on Visual Information Processing, researchers openly stated that the standard ISO 10993 is, quote, not intended to provide a fixed set of testing methods, including acceptance criteria, end quote, and that the final opinion is on the manufacturer. These types of comments have led many to consider these regulations as more favorable to industry's profits than protective of consumers' health. The source for this is M. Augustinic et al., Biocompatibility of Medical Devices and Their Risks, the 2019 8th European Workshop. The situation has been gaining attention from concerned citizens and even investigative reporters. For example, the International Consortium of Investigative Journalists shared medical implant stories from their readers in November 2019. They collected more than 3,500 responses from people affected by the medical device industry in 50 countries, bringing to life the personal cost of implants that fail. To date, they are still running news stories as part of their implant files. Source for this is Wilson Chapman A. et al., International Consortium of Investigative Journalists Implant Files, November 2019. The image is of Christina Chung, ICIJ, and reproduced with permission from the International Consortium of Investigative Journalists. While industry has continued to profit from the new testing guidance, injured consumers have continued to fight back. Most notably, public pressure was put on the FDA about adverse health effects from dental amalgam fillings, as well as the metal-containing birth control device, Essure, which was eventually ended for distribution in the USA on December 31st, 2018. These concerns and more finally led the FDA to host a meeting of the Immunology Devices Panel about dental amalgam and metal implants on November 13th and 14th, 2019. Prior to the panel meeting, the FDA had shared two new documents, one being a literature review on dental amalgam and the other being a review of scientific information related to metals and their uses in implants. Some IAOMT members wrote responses to the FDA highlighting risks and studies overlooked in their reviews, and Dr. Jack Call, the executive chairperson of the IAOMT Board of Directors, spoke at the Immunology Devices panel meeting to share pertinent research and express concerns. The following is an excerpt from his presentation.
Yesterday, I heard the following phrases: individual variability, underlying assumptions, conflicting results, and somewhat imperfect. Even though intellectually we might all agree that a perfect study on amalgam safety will never occur, the FDA's behavior sure doesn't reflect that. They'll keep hoping to find one forever. Over the years, we've been told that the FDA does not consider the precautionary principle, nor additive or synergistic considerations. For example, when there is concurrent exposure to both lead and mercury, even though it is well documented that both together are more toxic than one by itself. Let's face it, what has been occurring the last 3 decades is a racket. The institutional inertia for a grandfathered substance, mercury fillings, the alleged safety of which is perpetuated by a trade organization, the American Dental Association, and which is then tolerated by the government body responsible for protecting the public, the FDA. I've got one word for it: reprehensible. My call to action for the FDA is to apply the precautionary principle and start now by restricting the use of amalgam in children, pregnant women, and those with kidney and neurodegenerative diseases. In conclusion, relative to some comments made yesterday, I've been placing composites which are BPA-free for years now. Thank goodness the dental profession has very good alternative materials. Additionally, I was the dental director of a federally funded community health center serving indigent Medicaid populations for 25 years. I figured out how to utilize rubber dam to provide high-quality adhesive dentistry without amalgam, just like dentists in the countries where amalgam use has been eliminated or heavily reduced.
On September 24, 2020, the FDA issued recommendations for dental amalgam that warned harmful health effects of mercury vapor released from the device could impact high-risk populations. In particular, the following groups are now advised by the FDA to avoid getting dental amalgam whenever possible and appropriate: pregnant women and their developing fetuses, women who are planning to become pregnant, nursing women and their newborns and infants, children, especially those younger than 6 years of age, people with pre-existing neurological disease, such as multiple sclerosis, Alzheimer's disease, or Parkinson's disease, people with impaired kidney function, and people with known heightened sensitivity, allergy, to mercury or other components of dental amalgam. Source: United States Food and Drug Administration. FDA issues recommendations for certain high-risk groups regarding mercury-containing dental amalgam. September 24, 2020.